everybody. I'm Craig Silliphant, the movie geek for thefeedbacksociety.com, and I'm here to say we have to stop treating Star Wars like it's on a holy pedestal. Stop shouting at me, but just hear me out and decide for yourself. Seriously, it's just as hard for me to embrace this idea, but we need to temper our expectations of these films, especially when the worst of us are sending hate mail and death threats to the actors who play characters we don't like. That's disgusting and against everything about the concept of good that these movies stand for. But I don't want to talk about Last Jedi and its issues today. I want to talk about Solo. Solo, a Star Wars story, encountered some kind of box office fatigue. As of this taping, it's made $317 million worldwide against a budget of $400 million, $250 to make it and $150 to market it. The reasons for its failure are myriad. First off, they probably thought it would be a good anchor spin-off because Han's such an important character, but it actually made it feel like a money grab and potential tainting of that iconic character. The directors were fired and Ron Howard was brought in, which obviously didn't reduce the budget. Rumors about acting lessons for Alden Ehrenreich abounded, and instead of waiting a full year, it was released only a short time after The Last Jedi. But here's the thing, I heard a lot of whining and hyperbole about it, but Han Solo wasn't all that bad. You can read my full review at the Feedback Society. I'm not saying it was great, it just wasn't terrible. In fact, I've seen worse Star Wars movies. It may even be more even of a movie than Last Jedi. For the record, I don't love or hate Last Jedi. It has some brilliant moments, and it has some real head-scratching moments. Now, Solo doesn't have a lot of depth, but Han Solo is a well-paced swashbuckler, which is probably what it set out to be. Why is that such a bad thing? They can't all be Empire Strikes Back. And as Feedback Society writer Ian Goodwillie pointed out to me, even the original Star Wars doesn't have a great deal of depth. Anyone who says different is confusing depth with nostalgia for their childhood. I understand why we treat it like a holy thing. 77 Star Wars, it's still hard for me to call it A New Hope, was the first movie my parents took me to in the theater. I grew up a Star Wars kid in a Star Wars world, so I get it. Back then we just had one movie. Then two, then three, then nothing for a number of years. That does something to your mind. It leaves you desperately wanting more of something that doesn't exist. Now, like superhero movies, they want to crank them out. I also grew up with comics, so I like that we get all these comic book movies, and I should say, Han Solo is at least as enjoyable as, say, Doctor Strange. What these big tentpole movies are doing to the landscape of film is something I've rallied against, but that's a topic for another day. Today, we're talking about the world we live in, not a better world. And while I'd rather see money going to P.T. Anderson or another great director making brilliant films, I'd still rather see a new Star Wars movie than just yet another forgettable, big-budget CGI video game adaptation. I'd be fine with seeing a bunch more Star Wars movies. Some of them would be good, some of them would be terrible. It might be hard to adjust to this thinking, but you can't go back. They can never be what they were to you back then. So why make yourself mad? Why ruin it for your own kids? You can dislike a movie, but why throw the bantha out with the bathwater? Why decide that we're done with Star Wars as a concept if it can't be perfect? I'm obviously not one to call for a sensible retreat into mediocrity. Movies should aspire to something greater, whether we want to think of them as art or just something we have to spend our hard-earned money on. But we'd enjoy this amazing universe that George Lucas started so much more if we could just let go. Maybe we should think of them more like, say, Bond movies. It's not apples to apples, especially since Bond movies only come out every few years, but there's also a lot less of a giant universe for them to play in and less stories to tell. But we're excited when a new James Bond movie's coming out. Maybe we argue about who should play Bond, hopefully without bullshit death threats. Then we go see it. Some of them are awesome. Some of them suck. And in fact, if you reach back through time, some of the classics also don't hold up as well. Even Bond himself seems a lot more like a sexist, misogynist dinosaur than what you remember as a kid. But my point isn't about Bond. It's just about taking these movies as they come and enjoying them for what they are, or say disliking them for what they aren't, but not throwing Star Wars as a concept out. And while it's worth mentioning that while I'm talking as a Star Wars fan to other Star Wars fans, a lot of this conversation wouldn't exist if Solo hadn't cost so much to make. It wouldn't be a conversation about poor performance if they hadn't given it such a crazy hurdle to jump. So a lot of this is on Disney and Lucasfilm. If we can agree to chill out, maybe they can agree to make good choices instead of being too paralyzed to move. Anyway, I want to end with my son, who'll be 5 in July, talking about seeing his first full movie in the theater, which was, of course, Solo. Did you like that Han Solo movie?
Yeah.
What was your favorite part?
Flying the Millennium Falcon and Lando Calrissian.
And Lando? So is Han Solo your favorite Star Wars movie, or do you like a different one better?
I like all of them.
You like all of them?
Yeah.
So they can just keep making them as far as you're concerned?
Yeah.
Hard to argue with that. Take Star Wars off an unrealistic pedestal so your kids can enjoy it too. I'm Craig Silliphant, the movie geek for the Feedback Society. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or read more great pop culture writing at thefeedbacksociety.com. Oh, and may the Force be with you.